first thing on our agenda is the Administrative Committee, and that is led by Mr. Hackney Howard.
Thank you, Mayor Stallings. We have the honor tonight of having some representatives from the local health department here to update us on COVID-19 and some of the trends that they are seeing, and also to update us on a report that they gave to the department heads recently on safe COVID practices. I'd like to introduce, many of you already know him, but our health director, Battle Betts, is with us, and also Ashley Stoops, who is the director of policy planning and preparedness for the Albemarle Regional Health Services. But we have them here, and I would just like to turn it over to them to let us know some things they think is important regarding the region and COVID.
Okay.
So Ashley and Battle, if y'all would like to chime in, we're very pleased to have y'all here with us tonight. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks so much. We appreciate you guys having us, and I'm really just here for moral support. Ashley's got the program, but certainly any questions or comments that you all have, we're certainly willing to entertain those as those arise. So jump right in, and Ashley, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you and take it from there. Thanks again for having us.
Great. Yeah, thank you all so much for having us. We really enjoyed speaking with the Edenton group last week, and I'm glad that they found the information valuable, and really appreciate you guys asking us here tonight. So what we're going to do first is really just go through some of the data, an overview of the data, then go through some of the guidance so that you understand a little bit of the why. Why are we doing the things that we're doing, and hopefully it'll help all of the different pieces make sense, and then as you said, some of the steps to stay healthy. As Mr. Betts said, if you have any questions, please let us know. This provides more of an overview of the case count globally. And one thing that I pointed out when we spoke to the staff for Edenton that I thought is really interesting and a little mind-boggling as well, as you can see at the bottom of this slide that the pandemic was declared on March 11th. It seems like so long ago, yet just yesterday as well. And actually, when we got the notice that the pandemic was declared, we were actually meeting with the control group for Chowan and Edenton. And we received that notice at that time, and you can see the global case count then was just over 100,000. So right now, we are above that for the state of North Carolina alone, and also very close to that is Virginia, our neighbors. And we really monitor what is going on in Virginia. As you know, we're a very mobile society, and so we're definitely seeing how the Virginia trends impact our region as well. This slide provides more of a breakdown by county. We think it's very important to show the active cases and really understand the true current activity throughout our community. So that's something that we always try to communicate through our surveillance report. And as you all know, we send out that surveillance report each week. A few of the pieces of information on that report you see here as far as the total case count. And we know many things that impacted this. The guidance as far as testing and who we are testing. Early on, we were not really testing individuals who were not symptomatic, but as you all know, that guidance has shifted, and so we're testing more and more people. And we're also seeing more and more testing events across the district. This shows the new case trend. This is very helpful when we are looking at that 7-day moving average as far as what are we seeing throughout our communities. Unfortunately, we're still more elevated right now. We're essentially in our first wave, I would think. I think Mr. Betts has noted that a couple of times. And we are leveling, so hopefully we will begin to see that downturn. The state of North Carolina overall is beginning to see a downturn in their new case trend, and so we know that Virginia, they have recently had an uptick in cases, and so we feel like we are slightly behind North Carolina, but also mirroring some of what we see in southeastern Virginia. The active case trend, again, it was said that we really like to pay attention to those active cases. One thing that we are extremely proud of with our staff is that we really work hard. Our clinical staff is amazing, and they work very hard to not only provide the clinical services day in and day out, meeting the community needs and those traditional public health services, but also to follow up with each of these cases and make sure that the individuals are following the guidance, they're isolating, they're quarantining if they're contacts, and making sure that they are doing better and improving, and then we can officially move them to the recovered case count. This is the incident rate. You'll notice on the state website, the state has been reporting for quite some time, and you can see it on the map. Really, the state focuses on the total case incidence rate as far as cases per 10,000 population. We have listed it here in comparison, showing each of our counties, along with the active case incidence rate. And really what this does, as we know, when we're looking at case counts from county to county, all of our counties vary. And we have a different population base in each county. So essentially, by determining this incidence rate, we're putting everybody on that same playing field. So that way we can see how they really compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. We did pull the North Carolina active case information from their report that they issued today, and they do issue that just once a week. Another piece of information that we've started including on our surveillance report that people find very helpful is the percent positive total test. This is the new data that we have just begun receiving from the state of North Carolina, but they have been able to go back and look at that information. This attempts to pull together all of the electronic labs and other labs that are conducted across the state. And so I believe it was sometime in July the state actually required the reporting of all tests. The problem that we had early on is we were just getting those positives. So this helps to give us a more complete picture as far as what is that percent positive of total tests conducted. And as you can see, we have consistently in the last few months been below that 10% mark, which is a good metric that we have noted, and a lot of representatives from CDC and others. If our communities are below that 10% mark, then they say that we're really in pretty good, a good location as far as the total tests conducted. But we definitely want to see it lower. The ARHS response objectives, as you can see here, this is something that we have been monitoring since January. We have been activated since the beginning of March, but we've been communicating with all of our partners. And really, our ultimate goal is to protect the public's health. We also want to minimize public disruption, continue to provide our essential services, and really support all of our partners throughout this response as well. When we think about COVID-19 and how it spread, we have learned a lot. When we started talking in March, we were still learning so much about this virus, and fortunately we have learned quite a bit, but we still do have a bit more to learn. And so we do know that this guidance will shift and be updated as we continue to learn more from the various studies that are conducted. So I feel very confident right now in the way that COVID-19 spread is really from those tiny droplets from an infected person's nose or mouth. We'll go into a little bit more detail in just a bit, a way to protect ourselves and the science behind that, and you'll find out a little bit more about that 6 feet magic number as far as the 6 feet distance. But when we consider an individual who's a close contact, we are looking at individuals who have been within that 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. And that's why we really are encouraging that physical distance. It really minimizes the potential for exposure if you can keep that distance. Obviously, we see more force and more spread with coughing, sneezing, yelling, singing, cheering. Those types of things obviously can cause those droplets to spread farther. And so that's, again, why that distance is so important. People are most contagious when they have symptoms, but we have seen some asymptomatic spread and also spread prior to symptoms beginning. Many of you may know that flu, for instance, you can actually shed the flu virus for 24 hours prior to your first symptoms. What they found with COVID-19 is you can shed the virus up to 48 hours prior to your first symptom. So if you are in close contact with someone, if you've been in a close setting with individuals who have COVID symptoms or have tested positive, we will often ask, who did you come in contact with while you were symptomatic? And of course, it's 48 hours prior to. Excuse me. Just wanted to make sure that we have been able to got up. He got so up. Been able to get in touch with anybody who may have been in contact with you during that time period. When we think about viruses overall, they love to shift and drift and mutate. And so we're constantly learning more about this. And it's very important to keep those situations in mind. As far as touching contaminated objects, I know there was a lot of concern really early on about the surface spread. And really, they do not see this as high risk. This is very low risk when we're talking about COVID-19 spread. And it's really mainly if we're not practicing proper hand washing techniques. And we potentially touch something with the virus on it and then touch our mouth, nose, or eyes. So again, you'll hear us say the 3 W's. Wait 6 feet apart, wear a cloth face covering, and wash those hands. And really, the way that COVID-19 spreads, that are the biggest safety mechanisms that we can put into place. We all have seen the symptoms for COVID shift and change. We definitely see a wide variety of symptoms ranging from mild to severe illness. Fortunately, we are seeing more mild illness now than we were early on. But again, there could be lots of reasons for that as far as some of the testing components. Also now we're seeing more illness in our younger population. So those individuals are not as likely to have the underlying conditions, although some still do. But as you can see here, the list really is quite broad. What we have heard more recently is that really the headache is a big, big piece. Also just simple allergy symptoms, sinus symptoms. So we definitely encourage individuals to take note of how they feel, take note of any symptoms, and always take steps. Stay home if you're sick, hand washing, and those types of things. Those who are at risk for severe illness, definitely individuals 65 and older, those with underlying health conditions, immune compromised, serious heart conditions. We still are working very closely with our congregate care settings, our nursing homes, long-term care facilities, our prisons and other institutions as far as those congregate settings, and making sure that we're really paying close attention to the activity that's going on there. On July 6th, the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services has updated their guidance. I was actually looking through guidance today, and since March, they've updated guidance 14 times, but you can see we're hanging on pretty good from July 6th. This is our most recent update. Really, at this time, anybody who is suspected of having COVID-19, we want them to get tested. If you have come in contact with someone, regardless of your symptoms, if you've been to mass gatherings, any of the individuals who work in congregate care settings, first responders, frontline workers, those who have been exposed, definitely we want you to consider getting tested. Keep in mind, though, that the commercial lab capacity, while it is expanding, we can see some delays from time to time. So right now, it seems that we're getting our results back in a days. Sometimes, depending on the number of tests that they're running, it can take up to 10 days. But fortunately, the last couple of weeks, we've seen a really good turnaround. The Edenton Health System has done a great job. So I know that is the access that many of you have in Edenton. And so they are able to work with their system in Greenville, and they can usually turn their results around in about 24 hours. As far as ARHS, we do offer testing in each of our sites. We try to spread it out to make sure that no matter where you are, you can likely get a test close by within each of our 8 counties. We've heard tests both from LabCorp and also from the state lab. State lab does have a few extra requirements. They do want to make sure that if we send specimens to the state lab, individuals are symptomatic and meet the certain criteria. But really, with our LabCorp test, we can pretty much test anybody. We do always encourage individuals to go to their primary care provider first. And that's really because, as you saw, as far as underlying conditions, we want to make sure that individuals, particularly if they have underlying health conditions, that they are being treated for that condition, taking the COVID into consideration. We are seeing more and more deaths from COVID-19, and so we want to really prevent that and make sure that individuals are taken care of from the very beginning. So, I know we've heard a lot on the news as far as contact tracing and case investigation and isolation and quarantine. And so, one of the things that we wanted to provide today is just a quick overview of what does all of this mean. So if you're tested and it comes back positive, no matter where you were tested, we will get a copy of the lab results, the positive lab results, and contact you. This is called a case investigation. So we will talk to you about who you've been in contact with. You remember those symptoms in the 48 hours before. We'll provide guidance on how you should isolate. You keep in mind, when we talk about isolation, we're talking about for individuals who are sick and have symptoms. Those are the individuals that are isolating. When we identify your contacts, we may, if you have close contacts, we may ask them to quarantine. And so quarantine is when you come in contact with somebody who is sick, but you're not actually sick yourself. The contact tracing, what we will ask individuals if they're identified as a contact is to isolate or quarantine themselves for 14 days. And the reason that is because the incubation period for this illness is between 2 and 14 days. And we have seen individuals who present with their first symptom on day 13. So this is something that we take very seriously. And also keep in mind, even if you choose to be tested, we will still recommend that you quarantine for the 14 days. That test is really just a snapshot in time, and it's only good for that moment that you were swabbed. Definitely that viral load can increase later on, and so again, that 14-day is very important for the quarantine. If you are sick, if you are in isolation, the guidance there is a little bit different. So you can actually stop isolating when you can answer yes to all 3 of these questions. Has it been 10 days since you first had symptoms? Have you been without fever for 24 hours without any medicine? And are your symptoms improved? If you can answer yes to those, then you are free from isolation. And again, our staff will be in touch with you and make sure that you've met all those criteria. So this, we're going to close out with just a few slides on the steps to stay healthy. And as you know, this is a slide that I think we have used for probably 75 years. If you had the PowerPoint back then, but these are tried and true public health messages. So washing those hands, avoid touching your eyes and nose, covering your mouth with a tissue or your sleeve. All of these things are very, very important. The social distancing is nothing new either. When we had some of our earlier pandemics, those components, they are the steps to protect ourselves. But really with all of this, it's about that layered approach. And I think we're saying that more and more, so you'll probably continue to hear that. But when we talk about the physical distancing or the social distancing, you can see here that this chart or graph actually shows a study that 3 feet of physical distance can decrease the risk of spread from almost 13% to just over 2%. And 6 feet then doubles that protection. So I know many of you have probably seen where other states or the World Health Organization has actually gone the route of the 3 feet physical distance. But CDC in North Carolina, they essentially have chosen to go the route of the 6 feet because, again, there is an increased level of protection with that. And so it also helps us provide a little buffer zone and making sure that we can maintain that physical space to prevent the spread. When we talk about face coverings, really this is about source control. And I know that many of you have shared that, seen that, we're helping others, we're protecting others from ourselves. And we're seeing that it may reduce the risk of spread 1/2 to 2/3. So there was actually a study that was reviewed from some cases. There was 2 hairstylists, I believe this was out in the Midwest. These 2 hairstylists were symptomatic, but they actually spent about 8 days symptomatic, still starting clients. And actually, over that time frame, they came in contact with 139 clients. everyone wore their face coverings, and the face coverings varied. Some wore N95 masks, some wore surgical masks, some wore cloth face coverings, but everyone attested to actually wearing a face covering, particularly the stylists. And none of those clients got sick. They did have household members and close contacts of family members who got sick, but none of their clients did. So we have really good information that should really be a huge, huge help. And then, of course, hand washing. So again, we're talking about those layered approaches. Try to keep that distance, individuals. That will be our first line of protection. Then wear that face covering so that we make sure that if we do break that barrier, we've got the face coverings to help minimize the spread. And then finally, regular hand washing. My poor child, he's 8, but he already is so sick of it because, this public health mom, we have to always wash our hands, hand sanitizer, wipes, we have it all. But it can drastically reduce the spread of respiratory illness. So again, we just want to keep things in perspective, get those facts. As we know, this is not just a pandemic, but also an infodemic. So we appreciate you asking us to be here tonight to talk about this and to give a little bit more information, combine information from our site, CDC, or the state. And then, of course, you can always contact your local health department. Amber Woodell has been our supervisor there. She does an amazing job, and I know she is willing to answer and help you guys out in any way she can. All right.
Thank you, Ashley and Battle. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us this evening. I know individually I really appreciate the weekly updates that you guys give, and we're all very thankful for what you guys are doing. We appreciate it.
Great. We hope they are helpful. We will definitely keep them coming.
Thanks again. Mayor, that concludes.
Thank you guys for having us.
All
Yeah,
right.
certainly.
Thanks so much, y'all. Dr. Sher, Anne Marie, do y'all have access again, or?
Yes, we've got the slides that you sent us, and we're happy to share. So thank you both for being with us. Yep. Have a good night.
Great.
Thanks.
All right. Well,
Thank
you all
you.
have a great night.
Bye.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Mayor, that concludes the first item that we need to discuss. I'm very excited about the second item. We've got Chief King with us tonight. You may recall that after the death of George Floyd, the council got together and issued a statement of solidarity. And as a part of that solidarity statement, we felt it would be a good idea to allow Chief King some time to review his department's use of force policies, de-escalation policies, and look at the training that he's able to provide his officers and give us a report on all of those things. COVID slowed that down a little bit like it has everything else, but he's here tonight, and I have had numerous conversations with him even prior to George Floyd's death about the importance he places on this, and we felt like it was important for us to be educated, but also for the town to know exactly what our department is doing in the hopes that we can avoid some of the things that we've seen nationwide. So Chief King, I'm very happy to have you here tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Hey, That is the way of the world, the Zoom, but we're going to enjoy it. Again, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here tonight. As Councilman Hyde alluded to, I'm here to discuss our best practices, policies, and trends, and what we're doing in the Eden Police Department. And I think at the end of my presentation that you'll be proud of your police department and the great things that we're doing here at the police department. My next slide, I'm going to discuss the North Carolina Police Chiefs Association governs the, we're not in charge of other police chiefs, but we oversee the training, the philosophies, the best practices, the best cutting edge technology, and we push that information out across North Carolina. And I have an opportunity to be the Regional 9 Director, which covers Wilson, Nash, Escombe, Pitt, Chowan, Pastor Tank, and McQuinnis. Like, again, I'm not in charge of any other chief, but we push out information of best practices. And we got together and we just, with our police attorney that we have for the association along with the Sheriff's Association, and we came up with the best practices that to keep us on the cutting edge, because we all know that in North Carolina, we are a right to work state, not a collective bargaining state, so we don't have unions and things like that. So it makes it a whole lot easier when people are not doing correct things, that we can be able to handle and discipline correctly. But for a few minutes, just take a few minutes, it's about a 3 or 4 minute presentation that we have, and which will answer a lot of your questions as far as policies, rules, and regulations.
Chief, we're running into a technology problem. Even though we tested it, we're using the phone for the audio, so I think that's blocking
Okay.
the video. But maybe you can kind of briefly
I will.
review those.
If Tammy, if you can pause it right there. What you see above you is what they call the 8 can't wait. The police departments across North Carolina have banned chokeholds. They made mandatory de-escalation training. They give warnings before shooting. Try to use a minimum level of force before you have to go to deadly force. Come up with policies for duty to intervene. Ban shootings on moving vehicles. We'll also have a force of continuance so the officers learn about your level of force. So in other words, you would start off with deadly force. You would work your way up hands-on, OC spray tasers, work your way up to the chains of force, and also report all use of forces. Because back in the days, police departments were not reporting their use of force. But now we report every use of force that we encounter. We report it, investigate it, and document it. So that way I can see at the end of the year where my levels of force at. Am my guys averaging what the normal pace is, or do we have a lot of force? And if we do, I'll look at that and see why we're using force. Is it a training? Is it verbal judo? You know. So again, these are some of the best practices that have come across North Carolina, and they call it the 8 can't wait. And I'm proud to be able to say that we already had these policies in place. It didn't way before George Floyd incident. You couldn't shoot at moving vehicles. We didn't have chokeholds. Chokeholds were illegal unless it was an absolutely deadly force. So it's the things that are going on in other states. North Carolina was already leading ahead when years ago when they came out with 21st century policing. All those things had already taken place here at the Eden Police Department. Next slide, Dan. Topics of concern. At the very top, I have community engagement. That is very important. We all know that without the community, we're just here. You know, the taxpayers pay us to be here to patrol the city, but at the same time, we need their help. And community engagement is the key. If you get to know me, and I get to know you, then you're able to trust me and be able to provide the information that's needed to be able to solve cases. So that is the great key. Body worn cameras. We have them there thanks to council, allowed us to get a grant, and they are already helping us solve crimes. We are able to get on scene, turn these body cameras on, capture people that are at scene, that maybe stick around, that we can go back and look at the body cam video and put them there on scene. I mean, they are great too. And it also helps out when people allege things that have happened, we can go back and look at the body camera and determine if that really happened or not. Supervisor responsibility. Our supervisors are receiving training. Captain Brown just came from some top-notch training from the FBI leader course in Durham. Sergeant Simpson and Sergeant Colson are receiving training online, as well as Sergeant Colson is going to the North Carolina Internal Affairs Investigation Association School to be able to work internal affairs cases. Use of force. We're constantly looking at our use of force policy, tweaking it, changing it, making sure that we are using the least amount of force necessary. We have the bowler wraps. We have 2 more bowler wraps that just arrived. And that bowler wrap is a great tool to be able to allow our officers to use the minimum amount of force, because it seems like every morning I'm waking up to something strange happening across the country, just like what just happened in Wisconsin last night. Training. We're not going to stop training. We're not going to let COVID hurt us about training. We're going to do some Zoom training. We have implicit and bias training coming up next week, where 9 of my officers will take implicit bias through Wake Tech Community College online. So we're not going to let COVID stop us. In fact, I know it sounds, like Chief King is trying to be cheap or save money, but actually doing it online saves me hotel rooms and think they can actually do it in-house on the computer. So that's a win-win for me. It helps save money. Implicit and implicit bias. We all know, and we're going to learn about that later on, but we all have biases. Everybody in this room, and so much in society, people want to equate implicit bias to race. It has nothing to do with race. We all have implicit bias. So it's not a black versus white thing. It's what you have inside you that you have to be able to control. And as police officers, we have to make sure that we don't let our implicit bias influence our decisions. And in dealing with person during crisis, it is my goal to continue to have all my officers CIT certified crisis intervention training. Most of my staff are being trained, but the new officer that just arrived, it's a 40-hour course. So and it has to be in person. So as soon as the COVID is over, I will get them retrained or more training in CIT to get them up the par. Next slide, Tim. Community initiatives. I've shared this slide with Council previous. We're going to continue to do Know Your Rights presentation. We're going to continue to do our Council Aware Month, Night Against Crime, Edenton County Against Violence, Pack Patrol Car in November. We're going to do No Shade No Month in November. AB on the road party, kites and kids. Whenever we can get back to normal life, we're going to continue this communicating, because these are the things that are important. What I will ask from council and from your particular in your wards is to push your community members to come to these events, because together, if they get to know us as human beings, I feel like the bond and relationship will be even stronger. And I know that Edenton has a lot of things going on, but we really need them to come to some of these events so they can get to see Officer King or Captain Brown or Officer Simpson as human beings, and not as just the police riding through their neighborhoods. Next slide. This listen to. We were the first agency in North Carolina to get the bowler wrap, and then it spread like wildfire. Wilmington, Thompson Beach, UNC Chapel Hill campus, it just went like wildfire. But a lot of the chiefs saw this cutting-edge technology and saw the need for it, and they were able to purchase this, and it has really helped out, as you will see in the next slide, on why this tool, in all scenarios, it's not always going to work, but I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Next slide, Tim. I don't know if this clip is going to play with the sound, but what you're going to see is how the bowler wrap has been used across the country. And Edenton, it's about a minute long, but Edenton aired in this clip where our department was shown with some of the top-notch departments across the country. So everybody, when they see this bowler wrap, then they're going to see Edenton in the background with Officer Skarupa beside one of our cars. So it really made me proud to let us know that we'll stand on top of the cutting-edge technology, and that I have, just last week I had the Oakland County Sheriff's Office give me a call. Oakland calling Edenton Police Chief to ask me my opinion about the bowler wrap.
That's Oakland, California, right?
Yes,
Okay.
in Oakland, California. And I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, about the videos and sounds not working. I had while Tammy's getting through that, my next slide was gonna be talking about our equipment that we have. Again, I talked about the body cameras. I thank the council for allowing us to apply for a grant. We also have new rifles at the last committee meeting that the council just approved that. We will order those rifles once they open up their granted gyms. And we also have what I call our indoor de-escalating shoot simulator. So we have a shooting simulator that I visited Duke University, and they have one just like it. And I went and learned from those university police officers on what their best practices are for their shooting simulator. And I learned a whole lot. And we're going to come back. We're going to get it. I'm going to get it set up, and it's going to allow our officers to be able to have scenarios where someone may be running down the hallway and they reach their hand in their pockets and they pull out a cell phone, or they pull out a gun, or they pull out a knife. And this is going to be able to make them think, And it's real realistic, and it gives the officer the opportunity to practice those things upstairs, out in the field, and then we can talk about those decisions that were made and why they made those decisions. So I want to thank council for that. My next slide talked about implicit bias. And I had a video, but I'm sure everyone saw this video before of Mrs. Sarah, where she was on the show America's Got Talent, when she was overseas with Simon. And when she came out on stage, she looks to be about in her late 50s or early 60s, and she was just dressed, like someone that was born during that era, and everybody just looked at her, and the implicit bias kicked in. They assumed that she could not sing. They assumed that she was just going to be somebody who just happened to make it upstairs. And Simon and everybody in the audience, when she said the name of the song that she was going to sing, you could see the faces, but then she just blew them away. And that's what I talked about implicit bias. It has nothing to do about what color somebody is. They assume because this lady looked older and she was not dressed all fancy, that she was not going to be able to sing, and she blew the world apart. And that's why we got to work on our own implicit bias, because we all don't want to be fat, but we love donuts. That's my implicit bias. So we have to remember those type of things. We all have them. Next slide, Tammy. Again, we talk about the human attributes. We all have implicit bias as well. The well-intentioned individuals have them. But as police officers, we have to make sure that the decisions that we are making are not influencing those biases. And that is the key. When I'm having my officers trained about implicit bias, we have to make sure that decisions we're making, the tickets that we're writing, the people that we're arresting, is not because our own individual implicit bias. Next slide, Tammy. The main thing that I really harp on is physical fitness. I came in with the blessing of Miss Anne Marie. I allowed my officers to be able to have a physical fitness test. It's not mandatory, but if they can pass this test, which the same test that officers have to take to become a police officer 3 times a year, then we give them a bonus. And I love it that I had 2 officers step up this year. And come September, they take the last test, and if they pass it, then we'll cut them a check in November. But it really helps officers think your well-being, clear your mind, and and it's the best thing happening. If you can have the air to be able to breathe and think, you can make that last split-second decision. You don't get tunnel vision. So I encourage the officers to take care of themselves, and I'm just trying to build up a momentum. Hopefully one day I can make it mandatory for all the police officers to be able to pass the physical fitness test, but I'm just going to start off slow right now. We just make it voluntary. We have EAP. We have Pastor Downing, who's our police chaplain. She comes in and she checks on us all the time. I love her to death. She's always asking Chief, what can I do for the police officers? If anyone needs any spiritual guidance or prayer, will come through and they'll leave a request. So it's great to have her, and I really appreciate her for being our police chaplain. Next slide. And the most important thing, procedural justice. I believe in this philosophy, and to the day I leave out of here and retire, I'm going to go out here the same way. The way we treat my employees in-house is the same way they're going to treat their customers outside. Internal customer service is how you're going to treat your people, external customer service. So I always stress to my officers, it's very important that we treat people with dignity and respect, convey trustworthy motives, be neutral and transparent in decision making, and giving people voice when they count. That goes a long way. Those 4 things right there. And I also believe by working with the UNC Chapel School of Government and citation in lieu of arrest, there are many crimes in North Carolina that do not carry jail time. And it does not make any sense to take everyone before a magistrate to give them a bond. For example, if someone steals some gas from the gas station and if gas drive off, that does not carry jail time. But if we arrest that person and take them before the magistrate and place them on a $1,000 bond and they can't make bond, they sit in jail for a crime that does not carry jail time. So please understand, if you see us responding to a call where a crime has been committed and it's a misdemeanor, you may see us hand them something and leave, but don't just think that we didn't do our job because we gave them a citation. So they still have a court date. Nothing has changed. They still have to face that day in court, but we're not going to backlog our jail and cause the citizens to have to pay more money for someone to sit in jail. Bond is not made to punish people. It's only made to ensure people are going to come to court. If they don't have a history of failure to appear, then we don't mind cutting them citation. It keeps my officers available in the community for other things, as well as it keeps people out of jail, and it doesn't keep the jail that's not getting backlogged. So I believe in that. And that is my presentations. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief King. I've got a few, I don't know if the other ones do. So as I understand it, in North Carolina and in Edenton, the chokeholds are prohibited
Yes, sir.
by policy, both locally and statewide. Are there any other types of holds that are prohibited? And, you know, the one that stands out in my mind is a knee on the neck type of hold. Things like that also prohibited?
Yes, my officers in our policy, if someone says that they cannot breathe, we automatically going to be calling EMS. We're going to get them on scene. You know, we're not going to let, you know, someone that may be taking advantage of what's going on across the country saying that. If you say it, we call it EMS. You know, it's better to err on the side of caution, you know, even to the point where if they have to go to the hospital because they are necessarily faking, then we'll just take out the warrants and we'll just come get you another day. But we're going to make sure you're going to get that treatment right away. It is not worth it, Councilman Howard.
And does that include stopping whatever action that your officers might be taking
Yes,
that
sir.
cause that person to say
Yes, sir.
they can't breathe? Also, with the Bolo wrap, there was a presentation that we were not able to video. Can you just explain for our community how that works and what type
Yes.
of non-lethal apparatus that is?
Yes, sir. The Bolo wrap is a device that looks just like I want to call it a remote control. It's about this long, and it propels out a rope that wraps around your body, and it has a little bit of small hook that will hook into your clothes, and the line is so I want to call it Teflon, but the line is so strong that human beings can't break out of it. And it's a great tool because if you have a knife in your hand, you know, the whole thing of back in the days, 21-foot rule, officers would automatically pull their weapon and fire you. With the Bolo wrap, you can wrap their hands up, wrap their feet up, and then you can move in, knock the knife out their hand and take them into custody. And it's really great for people that maybe going through crisis, maybe have dementia, things like that. Now, it has its downfalls. If I was up against this table right here on a wall, and I was trying to tell the police I'm not going to jail, then I couldn't Bolo wrap because it needs room to be able to wrap around you. So just like anything, it has a limitation. But if someone was walking away from me, causing a disturbance, trying to run from me, it's a great tool to have.
And then lastly, right now, are we giving you and your department everything that you need for training as it relates to use of force and these other things you've been speaking to?
Yes, sir. Again, the one slide I have, Councilman Howard, I'm thankful that the council allowed us to be able to have the indoor shooting simulator. I'm thankful for the training budget, my training line item, because my guys are getting top-notch training, and we are going to continue to provide good customer service to the citizens of Edenton. Yes, sir. We have everything that we need.
Gee, how much importance do you give to implicit bias training? That to me was a pretty tough training. We all form opinions, and it's tough to get away from those opinions about certain people. Do your officers understand all the ins and outs of implicit bias training?
Yes, sir, they do. My younger ones that are receiving training next week understand the importance of just because you were raised a certain way, does not mean that it's any other way was different.
Right.
You know, and that's what I tell them. Like, as long as you don't let that decision influence what you do on the job, you know, your biases are never going to go away. You just have to recognize those biases and make sure they don't interfere with you as a police officer.
Good. Thank you.
Chief, I just want to thank you and feel like you're doing an outstanding job as police chief. You keep talking about retiring, so
Oh.
what you got, about 20 more years?
5 or 6 more years.
But thank you for the outstanding job that you're doing, chief.
Absolutely.
Again, the only thing I will leave you with is when we are out of this pandemic, I would love for the council to the best they can to try to get everyone in your different wards to be able to come out to our community. One day I want to see us have everyone that eats in at one of our community events. I know it possibly could happen, and I'm never going to say never. It's not going to never happen, but the more the merrier. So that way we can engage and people can see who we are as human beings.
Okay.
Chief, you mentioned a moment ago about the bolo wrap.
Yes, sir.
Does your officers have those?
We have 4 of them, sir, and my goal is to order every budget year, order 2 every budget year to the point where everybody has them. Because to give you a perfect example, Mayor, if we have one individual that's standing there and they have dementia and they're really strong and we don't want to hurt them, the bowler wrap is decided. If I had 2 officers on scene with the bowler wrap, the 3rd officer can do all the talking. Keep that person focused on them, where the other officers, bam, hit them up top, hit them down low. Now they wrapped up here, Then we can move in, put their hands behind their back safely, put them in handcuffs, and no one's hurt. Versus having to try to tackle them and take them down to the ground, and it's just not worth it. It keeps you safe, the defendant safe, and the public safe.
It'd be interesting to see that work,
Yeah.
but not on me.
Well, I thought you were going to volunteer.
No.
Well,
I'll volunteer.
and well, Mayor, my last 2 officers would be receiving their training soon. If you would like to, for us to demonstrate on, I'll be happy to give you a call. You can come
I
up
would
with
love
it.
for you to. Thank
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I want to watch that.
Oh,
That's all I Mayor. That's all I
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks,
Yes.
Chief.
Yes, sir.
We really appreciate it. Mayor Stallings, the next item on our committee agenda also involves Chief King. We're all aware that we've been working on a draft 2020 vision statement, and we're going to talk about that in more detail in the next agenda item. But Chief King has requested amendment to the draft that we've been working on as it relates to a free service that the North Carolina Department of Public Safety has. And on their website, they have free access to criminal histories to let landlords know who might be a potential problem or who has a really serious criminal history that the landlords might want to know about, and also that the town wants to know about. So he has recommended that we begin to publicize the availability of that and to make that as a part of our 2020 vision statement, that we believe it's important to publicize that to our landlords and to our community.
That's something we've needed. That's a great tool.
We've also worked hard to give the landlords some other tools which help the tenants. And one of those tools is something that Saoirse Scott was working on before her departure. And that was a brochure that she put together that was entitled A Guide to Property Maintenance Standards. And that includes information on what landlords are responsible for and what tenants are responsible for. In addition, we also have worked on and tightened up our minimum housing standards, which should also help out both the tenants and the landlords. And Chief feels like if we continue these efforts on both sides, on both the landlord side and the tenant side, that those 2 groups of people will be more in harmony and we'll have a safer town. So we would be recommending that we include that in our vision statement. The Second item is another, Chief continues to stay on the forefront of technology, and I think it's amazing for a town this size to have somebody with the forward thinking that he does, and he's very, very mindful of the cost of things, and he keeps tools in place, equipment in place at the cheapest price possible for us. But one thing that he has asked us to consider, and I think it's very, very important in light of the recent death we had right outside of town, but he is asking that we look into and at least receive a presentation on vehicle tag readers. And most of us may be most familiar with this. If you travel into Virginia, they have a vehicle tag reader as you go over the high-rise new bridge. And no matter what speed you're going, they're able to find out what your license number is. And then a week or so later, you get a bill in the mail for that. But it's the same sort of technology. In fact, the very same technology, as I understand it, Chief King. And that would maybe enable us to get quicker leads on some of the violence that's going on in the town, particularly what we refer to as drive-by shootings where cars are involved. With the use of some cameras around town, instead of just getting a vague description from an eyewitness, it was a black Tahoe or whatever the case may be, we would then be able to look at it and say it's a black Tahoe and it has Virginia tags or North Carolina tags. So all he's asking for now is that we have a presentation at a later meeting, potentially as early as our next meeting in September, just to learn more about that in the hopes that it might be something we could afford or want. But it's just another tool that he's brought to our attention.
Great.
Did anybody have any questions, or do you have anything you wanted to add, Chief King, to
No,
that?
You hit it right on the head, Councilman Hines. It's one of the things that it's a great tool, and just like you alluded to, when we had the incident on Mosley Street, the shooting, and the car came up, car at Red Street and turned on gravel, our camera caught the car, and we could tell it was a Honda Accord, but the license plate reader would have been told it was a Honda Accord belonging to Henry King. So I mean, it's a great tool to have.
Thank you. Mayor Stallings, I mentioned the 2020 vision statement, and that's actually the next agenda item we have. You may recall we did work on the draft vision statement, and once COVID hit, we weren't sure the financial impact and other impacts that would have on our town. And so we sort of tabled that for a while, and there's a general thinking now that we need to put that back on the table and begin discussing that. Our revenues are slightly down, probably not as bad as we thought they were going to be. Is that correct, Ms. Knighton, from the local taxes and other things? And the thought being, if we move forward now with a final 2020 vision statement, we can always come back and change it. If COVID has more devastating effects than it already has, we can come back and just re-look at it at that time. So it would be my recommendation, if the other committee members are fine with it, that we take a look at the 2020 vision statement at our September meeting. If we need to tweak it some more, we can do it. If we're ready to approve it, then we can do that also.
Okay.
Is everybody fine with that? Okay. The last item that the administrative committee has is we've had a lot of discussion at the last couple of meetings, and with good reason, about the improvements to the East Gale Street neighborhood. And there is a virtual walking tour that I'm not sure if we're going to be able to pull off the technology tonight to show that. But as they are working on that, I'll speak more to that. There is a video that gives a virtual walking tour of the improvements that are being made to the East Gale Street neighborhood. And that's on the 100th block of East Gale Street. And perhaps, Anne Marie, we can let the general public and also the council know how to access that on our own computers, because I understand it's quite motivating and quite rejuvenating.
It is, and it's located on the town's website, and we'll try to move it front and center under information so that people can watch it. It really is inspiring, and then in particular, looking at all that is going on in the neighborhood because of the work that the council has enabled in the redevelopment zone.
And one thing related to East Gale Street, I know it's always been a passion for Mr. Dixon, and certainly an interest to all of us, something I take an interest in. You know, I think that Edenton can become a national leader, and I know Mr. Dixon shares this vision for me in telling all of history, including African American history. And we've got a rich history here that we've not advertised enough. And Mr. Dixon is working really around the clock on trying to get some funds for the Kadish redevelopment project, and that's going to be quite an expensive undertaking. But that's a very important building to the town as a whole, very important building to the African American community. And one thing that I would like for us to discuss is with some of the funds that we're receiving from the sale of those houses, to see if we can devote a certain amount of those funds to a fundraiser who can help us with the fundraising efforts. And I think Councilman Dixon, you know more about it than I do, so if you could fill in the blanks.
Well, so we have had, I mean, this has been going on a long time, as y'all all know, and the East Gale Street, I wish we could see this video, because you'll see how, you know, when you look at it, how important this place is. But it's a previously untold story of the Badham family and their ability to really build incredible buildings during a segregated time when it was very difficult for African Americans. And they not only built buildings, they built these enormous buildings that are just so well constructed and are just so important for Edenton's history. And that's the part we've never told. So I bet we've been probably working on this 4 years at least, really since Isabel, because that's when the church was so damaged. The windows are Tiffany. They're made by Mr. Tiffany in New York, and they're boxed up and crated up. And so we hired somebody that was the fundraiser, the development person previously for the National Trust, and he came down and did about a 3-month sort of exploratory campaign to see whether or not he could raise the money needed for this church, whether we need really another $1 million pretty quickly. And so we've got $250,000 from Sacred Places, which is a national group that really helps fund churches and redevelopment of churches and restoration of churches, and they've helped us come up with a plan to make Kadish sustainable once it's restored, so that it can be used by the community but also used by the church. And we were just getting ready to get going when the pandemic hit, and I think that really since all of the national attention has gone to some amazing African American causes, that this may be a better time to try to raise money for Kadish now than later. So David Cooper was our fundraiser, and he's the one that said, after he went out and talked to people all across the state and the country, that he really believes he can raise the money. And his the cost for this campaign is $36,000. And we're all, I think Mr. Coleman emailed me, and Anne Marie and Hack and I've talked that if we could take $18,000, we pay half of the development costs, and I think that'll get the ball rolling. And then Mr. Cooper is convinced that he can do it, and also if he can't, he said, if I can't raise the rest of the money from my own fee, then I'm not any value to you, and you can cancel any time. But he, Audrey Bond's the head of the Restoration Committee. The Eden Historical Commission has taken a very active role in this, and they have they've agreed to be in charge of the funds, the fiscal agent. And so what we're asking is that the $18,000 from the sale of some of these structures be given to the Eden Historical Commission, designated for this particular purpose. And hopefully we can sign a contract this week with the fundraiser, and then begin by the beginning to mid-September. And he is very, very, very optimistic. So
And one potential legal and financial obstacle that we do have is, and Ms. Knight knows more about this than I do, but North Carolina statute prohibits towns, or limits what towns can spend money on. And so what Ms. Knight and I discussed is perhaps having Mr. Ellis look into it to make sure that the town can legally apportion some of those funds towards this effort. And so with my administrative committee, are we comfortable enough in at least instructing Ms. Knighton to look into it with the attorney to see if we can legally spend this money, and then hopefully we can get a final vote on it at our next meeting. But as I understand, the fundraiser that you're talking about, he has a track record of raising money nationwide.
Nationwide, four
And-
churches, like this, so.
I think we'd be hard pressed to find $1 million in Edenton. So
Yeah.
it might be worth it to try to, and it's a great time for this type of cause nationwide to maybe attract some money here to little old Edenton. So is everybody good, Councilman Bond and Miller?
Oh, yeah.
I understand that the church members raise money.
Well, they are trying to raise some money. They've raised some, but we've already spent right much with all of what's been done so far. And so that money has been spent on restoring keeping the building like it is, watertight and all of that. So,
Can you just clarify, because the reason that the town would have an interest in helping Kadish be restored, because it will be multi-use.
yeah,
It's
okay,
not
so
just
it's
gonna
not
be
just
for
gonna,
a-
it's just
a
not gonna be
church.
just a church. It's gonna be, we've come, I didn't bring it.
Describe some of the other uses.
So, any type of activity that, theater, any type of like meetings, lunches, they're gonna make it so it can be, it's one of the largest spaces in town. So it's gonna be so that you can have tables in there, have dinners, have conferences and things like that. Students, I think there'll be a big,
Like a cultural community.
yeah, cultural community center, except on Sunday when it's the church. Yeah, so hopefully Kadish, the congregation will grow back to what it was. But these are different things, and Susan Beckwith at the end has been very involved. We've asked a bunch of businesses like Regulator Marine, they've been very generous so far, and we've asked them to, what can they use it for? When they have things, they said they could use it, often. So we actually, as part of that trial run to figure out whether we could do this, we also had to look at whether or not it was sustainable maintenance-wise. And the result was that from the community use that we need and that would happen, that they could sustain, the church could be sustained through probably a separate nonprofit foundation that owns everything, something.
I think Assembly right. Councilman Hyatt, now's the time to do this. We've got a lot of positive things happening on Gale. This would really be the icing on the cake, so to speak. And also, we have a commitment to our African-American community to take some steps to highlight their culture and to celebrate their heritage. And I think this is just a year to do it and get it done and move on.
Well, and it's right across the street from the visitor center. From the state historic site visitor center. We got Golden Franks going on. That's getting ready to get restored. The trolley goes by there. It's really just
Hannibal Bantam House.
Yeah, Hannibal Bantam House is being fixed up. The other house, almost everything in this movie that we looked at, if you could have seen it, is all getting fixed up. It's really amazing. I drive down there twice a day. It makes me so happy.
They're doing a lot of work on the courthouse.
Yeah.
On
So,
the corner of Oakland.
maybe we need to have a council field trip sometime. Reverend Poole's been very helpful with getting us connected with the leadership of the church on a statewide basis and a national basis, and that was very helpful. You finally got us plugged in where we needed to be. So, and they've been working hard. The congregation's been working hard, and then the overall association's been, very. It's all everybody's sort of rowing in the same boat now.
Well, Mayor, that
And
concludes.
trying to sell the church
Yeah, the other one.
over there on
Yeah.
Howard Street.
Mayor, that concludes our agenda. I apologize to
No problem.
fellow councilmen that it took so long, but we had a lot of exciting topics. And
Absolutely.
I appreciate Chief King and Councilman Dixon and Anne Marie for chipping in and helping out on those items.
So thank you. You brought us a good array of things, and we're
Yeah.
thankful for it. Our next committee is the Finance Committee, and that's chaired by Councilman Dixon.
So we have two quick things. The first one is the COVID CARES Act relief funding plan. Anne Marie, I'm gonna let you, you got the details more than I do.
So the federal government, as you know, through the CARES Act, designated a certain amount of money to be distributed to local governments to help with their costs in preparing for and protecting not only the community, but also their employees, and then other steps that had to be taken so that we could carry on business in light of COVID. Chowan County met with, the manager and the finance officer met with Virginia and myself a couple times and reviewed what the requirements were going to be. And ultimately, the counties are responsible. So they want to make sure that any funds that we submit to be paid pass muster and are appropriate and allowed under the CARES Act. And in your packet, we submitted to you kind of an outline of what we thought would be a good first step for our plan. We have to submit that to the county tomorrow. It's due by the 25th because they in turn have to submit it to the state office of the pandemic recovery office. And we followed the guidelines very carefully. All the department heads have been keeping track of their expenses, and Virginia had a really good handle on what we've spent on PPEs, what we've spent on new technology so that you all could operate and that staff could operate if need be remotely. We've also included what we think would be funds for customers who've been impacted by COVID. We're not allowed to use the money just to supplant or replace lost revenue, but for instance, customers who may have been laid off or had been furloughed and were unable to pay utility bills and were allowed under the governor's order to accumulate bills and not be cut off, we could make a grant to the emergency aid, and that's a qualified nonprofit, and then they would work with customers to make sure that truly they were impacted by COVID, and then they could grant them some relief to pay the town the bills that are owed. And then also I submitted to you in the packet a copy of the grant program that the county implemented recently, and that mirrored the grant program that DDE implemented early on based on fundraising efforts. So we still know that there are a lot of small businesses that are being impacted, that are hurting, and we would propose that a portion of the allocation that would come to the town could be granted to the Edenton-Chowan Partnership if they're willing to implement the same type of grant program they did for Chowan County. And I think because these grants have been staggered, because the impacts sometimes have come later. You know, not everybody was hit right away. People were trying to hang on, they were trying to make do, but now, wow, they realize they may need some financial help, and it would be great if our grant program could be helpful to them. So what we need tonight is, if you have any concerns, or if you wanted to, tell us to look at some other things to add. The good thing is this plan can be amended. It's not set in stone, and Kevin said it can be amended right up until December. All the funds have to be spent by the end of December, but if we, identify a need and we have funding, we can submit an amendment. So what I would ask is, that you authorize me to go ahead and submit the plan to the county with the understanding that it's in draft form, and then at the September meeting, I'll be able to come back and say, the Edenton Show-On Partnership is willing to work on a grant, to administer the grant. I'll talk to Emergency Aid, see if we can shore up their commitment, and then you can formally approve those types of grant agreements.
And will anybody have any comment on that? I think we'll send it on the full count again.
Yes, sir?
I hope it's minimal, but do we have a plan that, from this virus, people might be not working and not able to pay the rent or light bill? Or do we have a plan to, exempt them for a while or what?
So that's, if somebody were to become ill now, that is a really good thought. You know, what can we do? We can't exempt them, but we could try and make sure that they're aware of potential resources from these funds through emergency aid. I have heard of some of the larger cities in North Carolina that have set up programs to work to provide grants to nonprofits that deal with housing, so that some type of rental as well as mortgage assistance could be available. And we will, that's a great thought, and we'll kind of dig deep and see if we can't find a model that we could bring back to you to look at.
I've got a question that someone asked me, Anne Marie. Our trash folks, with this virus steady climbing in the county, are they getting hazardous pay for handling trash coming from all these houses and stuff, and you not know?
We have not set up any type of hazardous pay, but we have heard, and Tammy may be able to speak to this through the HR, but we have heard of other communities that are doing some sort of hazard pay. Tammy, have you?
Some cities and counties.
Is that if you want us to look at that, we can look at that as part of
I think it would be fair to them with the virus rising within the town of Edenton, that they're going to be handling all types of trash coming from all types of homes.
Talking about infectious material. Infectious material trash.
Any type of trash. Because if you're in the house for 14 days, you know.
We'll research that proposal as well as housing and rental assistance.
So, and then the last thing is the budget amendment, which is, if y'all saw in your packet that Anne Marie put a letter in that she had written back in June, but that we got an additional $99,148 in a grant for the parallel taxiway project, which, I mean, really is amazing, Anne Marie, that happened. And so we'll send that budget amendment up to full council. Anything else you want to add about it?
No, just in the scheme of all the important things we talked about tonight, it's kind of like, wow.
Yeah, but I mean, that's great, yeah.
That's a lot of money.
So that's all we have.
All right, that concludes our agenda for tonight. So unless somebody else has something else, we'll adjourn.